The Victorian rich and the Victorian poor. How very different their lives were. The Victorian era took place in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, when the country changed from being mostly agricultural, farm-based, to industrial, factory-based. The people who owned the factories became very rich, but the people who worked in them stayed very poor. Let's take a look at how each group lived. Poor people, even little kids, worked very long hours for very low pay. They lived in damp, filthy apartments. Often the whole family lived in just one room and they shared a bathroom with other people on the street. The sewage ran along the roads, and because it was so dirty and polluted, lots of people died from disease. If families became really poor, they had to go and live in a workhouse. These were places that were supposed to be charity, but in reality they worked the people living there to the bone. I have a video dedicated to Victorian workhouses that you can find in the description below. Moving on. Poor children, and that was most children, didn't go to school, because remember, they had to work to help feed the family. They worked in mines or as chimney sweeps, in the dark, breathing in smoke, and covered in scratches and bruises. Poor people mostly ate bread. If they were lucky, they could get some vegetables, but they were very difficult to find. There was hardly ever any meat. It was just too expensive. Clothes were second-hand and made from rough, scratchy materials. They can't have been very comfortable. They were full of patches because they couldn't afford to buy new clothes if they got a hole in them. The clothes weren't washed very well, so they'd be very smelly. Just like the people wearing them. And as for doing something fun, play, games, holidays, no time for that. They were working all the time, remember? Doctors, bankers, and factory owners, on the other hand, lived a very different life. They had expensive clothes and played sport like tennis and cricket. Poor people didn't have the time for activities like that. Life for the aristocracy was even better. Those were the people that were so rich they didn't have to work. They had very large houses and lots of servants to serve them. They had all the meat they wanted, as well as eggs and cheese, very expensive items for most people. They spent time at the theatre, hosted parties, and went on holiday. This was just not possible for most people back then. Rich children went to school, or they were tutored at home. They also had many toys when most others had none. Poor children made their own toys out of household objects. A spoon and a bit of cloth made a perfectly good doll. So you see, life was very different for Victorian rich and poor.